How long do you think you'd last in a sea of screaming steel? 10 minutes? An hour? The truth is, you'd be lucky to still be breathing after 10 seconds. A Crusader battlefield was nothing like the movies ever showed you. There were no slow-motion heroic moments, no time to strike a pose in the smoke and fire. Here, everything was the clash of metal, the screams of horses, the stench of sweat mixed with blood and filth, and an invisible weight pressing on your chest until you could barely breathe. Late 12th century. The Middle Eastern sun beats down on desert sand so hot it makes your vision blur. Sweat trickles under nearly 20 kilos of chainmail. Each iron ring grinds into your skin, every movement feeling like 1,000 needles tearing you apart. You're standing in the Crusader line, facing a wall of Muslim spears, swaying like a living wall of thorns. Before you even understand what's happening, an arrow whips past your ear, the hiss cutting straight into your brain. Then comes the shriek of hundreds more, falling like rain. The knight next to you drops instantly. An arrow slips through the eye slit in his helmet, hot blood spraying across your hand. This isn't a duel you imagined. This is a meat grinder. Every step lands on corpses and mud the color of rust. Even veteran warriors here can't be sure they'll survive until nightfall. And you, a person from the 21st century, unaccustomed to the smell of blood, the sound of bones breaking, or the weight of a shield 10 times heavier than your laptop. What would you do in this storm? The answer's simple. You'd be a single blink between the shouts of victory and the screams of the dying. But to understand why the Crusader battlefield was this brutal, we need to look at the people who made it. The knights with red crosses, and the fierce Muslim warriors defending their homeland. Before blades clashed, the Crusader battlefield was already shaped by people, weapons, and belief. The things that turned men into machines willing to fight through any pain. They were called Miles Christi, soldiers of Christ. The red cross on their white cloak looked like nothing more than cloth, but it carried the weight of a vow. Fight until your last breath. Behind the chainmail, bucket-shaped helmets and wooden shields rimmed with iron were men who had trained their whole lives, riding horses since the age of 5, swinging swords since their teens. Their muscles were hardened by thousands of hours of drills, shoulders tough from years of wearing heavy armor. But even they, under the searing heat and a rain of arrows, could fall within moments. And when they fell, they were trampled under the hooves of charging horses, with no ceremony to mark their passing. Facing them were the elite forces of the Islamic world, led by legendary commanders like Saladin, both a master strategist and a model of Eastern chivalry. Their mounted archers fired from a distance, moving like the wind, disappearing before the enemy could respond. Light armor and compact weapons kept them fresh under the burning sun. For them, this wasn't just about defending land, it was about defending their faith, a sacred duty. On this battlefield, every weapon was a death sentence. A single strike from a long sword or battle axe could tear through bone and flesh like cloth. A composite bow could send an arrow through light armor faster than you could blink. A cavalry charge could shatter ribs through a shield with raw impact. And once you were surrounded, there was no escape. Only the blind, desperate swing of your weapon in chaos. When night fell, camp was no safe place. The groans of the wounded filled the air. The stench of infected wounds clung to the tents. And the hollow eyes of the survivors told stories without words. Both Crusaders and Muslim warriors lived with hunger, disease, and the memory of friends who would never return. Dawn, July 4th, 1187. The Battle of Hattin, one of the bloodiest and most decisive clashes of the Crusades, waits for you. The sun hasn't yet climbed high, but you already hear the distant blare of Muslim war horns. The wind carries the smell of smoke, not from cooking fires, but from burning dry grass mixed with camel dung. It forms a choking haze that stings your eyes and dries your throat. Saladin knows. Thirst and heat will kill the enemy faster than any sword. The Crusader cavalry begins to press forward as the Muslim war drums pound like the heartbeat of the desert itself. You see arrows glint in the sunlight, and then the whole sky turns into a storm of iron. The sound of arrows tearing through the air is like the snapping of insect wings. A knight in front of you is struck by 3 shafts, 1 in the neck, 2 in the shoulder, and tumbles from his saddle, blood spraying in a hot arc. His panicked horse crashes into your line, knocking over more men. The order to charge comes. Your horse surges forward, hooves pounding into the scorching sand. Wind whips past your ears, but the screams and the crash of steel drown out everything else. When the 2 armies collide, the only sounds are the grinding of iron and the sickening crack of breaking bones. A Muslim warrior rushes at you, his spear punching through your shield as if it were paper. The violent pull throws you from the saddle. Your back slams into the ground, the air crushed from your lungs. You try to stand, but your legs shake, and your vision blurs with sweat and blood. Around you, the cries for help, the falling horses, and the victorious shouts of the enemy blend into a single symphony of death. You see comrades throwing off their helmets, trying to run, but Saladin's light cavalry hunts them down and strikes from behind. In less than an hour, the Crusader army is completely surrounded. The heat burns, your throat is sandpaper, and despair is everywhere. There is no glory of God here, only sand, blood, and the ragged breaths of the dying. And if you had been there, your story would almost certainly have ended on that dry, cracked ground, before you even understood what had just happened. As the sun set behind the hills of Hattin, the battlefield lay in a haze of red and gray. Desert winds carried the burnt smell of corpses, mixed with the stench of blood and dust. The battle was over, but hell remained. Most surviving Crusader knights were taken prisoner. Saladin was known for his mercy, but to the Templars and Hospitallers, warriors sworn never to surrender, he saw them as a threat that could not be allowed to live. Hundreds were executed on the spot. The sound of blades falling, the thud of heads rolling in the sand, and sprays of blood staining the clothes of the executioners filled the air. Ordinary soldiers were usually spared or ransomed, but spared didn't mean safe. Many were so badly wounded, with no medicine to treat them, that they died slowly on the road home. For the Muslim world, this was a holy victory. News spread from Damascus to Cairo, stirring pride and strengthening the belief that God was on their side. Poems and songs of triumph were written, telling of how Saladin had defeated the invaders. In Europe, news of the defeat caused shock across the continent. Preachers told of the tragedy at Hattin, warning that Jerusalem was in danger, and called for a new crusade. Kings like Richard, the Lionheart of England, and Philip II of France began preparing for a massive campaign, later known as the Third Crusade. Amid the ruins, there were stories never recorded in the chronicles. A young knight, moments before his execution, gave his silver ring to a fellow prisoner from his homeland, asking him to take it to his wife. A young Muslim warrior, after defeating an enemy, paused to give a wounded prisoner water, ignoring the stern looks of his comrades. Small moments, but proof that even in the darkest cruelty, humanity could still flicker. The Battle of Hattin didn't just redraw the political map of the Holy Land. It reshaped the lives of tens of thousands, both those who fought and those waiting at home. Looking back at Hattin and the Crusades, we don't just see the bodies left on the desert sands. We see legacies, both good and bad, that lasted for centuries. The battle showed that strength is not just in numbers or courage, but in strategy and the conditions of the field. Saladin didn't face the Crusaders head-on from the start. He used the weather, the terrain, and control of water to wear them down. Even the strongest army will lose if dragged into unfavorable ground. That lesson still applies today, except now, terrain might be cyberspace or the global market. Both sides believed they were fighting for a sacred mission. But when belief is pushed to extremes, it can erase moral limits. Hattin proved that ideals and faith, when weaponized, can ignite human tragedy. For all its brutality, the Crusades also created a cultural exchange between East and West. Europeans brought back medical techniques, vaulted architecture, spices, and new weapons. In return, the Islamic world learned from Europe about fortifications, shipbuilding, and certain forms of military organization. Today, many Crusader castles still stand in Syria, Israel, and Jordan, silent witnesses to an age of blood and steel. Even in the ashes, there were stories of respect between enemies. Saladin was known for his humane treatment of Richard the Lionheart, and many Western knights recognized him as a model of honorable warfare. It's a reminder that no matter how brutal the fighting, humanity can survive, if people choose to keep it. Put a 21st century person on a Crusader battlefield, and they'd collapse in seconds. Not just from weapons or armor, but from the shock. We live in a world of rules. There, the only rule was survive or die. And that's why this story reminds us to value peace, something millions had to give their lives to secure. The battlefield of Hattin is more than 8 centuries in the past. But if you stood on that hill today, you might still feel something. The wind moves through the dry grass, carrying distant echoes, the pounding of hooves, the clash of steel. Beneath the yellow earth lie countless unmarked bones, warriors who once believed they were fighting for the most righteous cause of their lives. What happened at Hattin was not unique. Human history is full of other Hattins, moments where faith, ambition, and pride drove thousands to their deaths. No matter how far we advance in technology, weapons, or law, the roots of conflict remain: greed, fear, and the need to prove power. Looking at the modern world, are we really so different? Today's battles might take place at negotiation tables, in cyberspace, or during economic crises, but the pressure, the tension, and the cost can be just as brutal. If history were to repeat itself, and you, a person of the 21st century, were thrown into a new Hattin, how would you react? Would you fight, bargain, or find a way to retreat? Lessons from the past only matter if we remember and apply them. And sometimes, the most dangerous enemy is not the one in front of us, but our own complacency in believing we've escaped history's darkness. But is that really the whole story? Or are there truths still untold, hidden between the forgotten lines of old chronicles?